Hello, you're watching Tell It Like It Is, and my name is Kathy Benuck. Today's show is part of the three-part series of interviews that we're doing called Race for the Sheriff, in which the two Republicans and one Democrat running for Sheriff of Hillsborough County will be in here to meet and greet us. The Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office is responsible for covering 876 square miles in New Hampshire that have a population of 393,207 people. And it includes the state's biggest cities, that is Manchester and Nashua, of course. The sheriff's deputies are New Hampshire certified police officers. The court officers are not. Those performing as the New Hampshire certified police officers are doing really the duties similar to those of U.S. Marshals, and they work very, very closely with local, county, state, and federal law enforcement agencies. They've got a lot of duties that include involvement in domestic violence-related issues and those dealing with child custody, landlord and tenant disputes, bank levies and attachments, family court issues, and the court offices, of course, provide security to the perimeters of all of the courts in the district. And as far as the deputies go, though, there could be some dangerous situations that they can be involved in on a day-to-day basis. For example, while they're providing prisoner transport, or while they have custody and control of prisoners in the courthouses, while they're delivering restraining orders, and particularly when they're trying to locate people for whom bench warrants have been issued, and then they have to execute those warrants and can get involved in some pretty sticky situations. Now, my guest here today is one of the Republican candidates, Frank Szabo. And Frank was born in Philadelphia. He now lives in Goffstown, moved here last year, and lives here with his wife and daughter, and he's developing an organic farm in Goffstown. He previously was an entrepreneur and owned and operated a very successful limousine service. He's been a local freedom fighter for many years, and in Pennsylvania was involved in numerous challenges, legal challenges to zoning laws and to income taxes. He served as the Pennsylvania State Coordinator of We the People Congress, County Coordinator for the Sheriff Project, and was the Pennsylvania State Coordinator for Ron Paul's 2008 presidential campaign. He's a member of Oath Keepers, which I didn't know what that was, so I looked it on the website, and it's described as a nonpartisan group of currently serving and veteran military, peace officers, and firefighters who want the Constitution returned to its legal and rightful place as the law of the land. And he's also been very active with the Free State Project, and their website describes that as an agreement among 20,000 pro-liberty activists to move to New Hampshire, where they will exert the fullest practical effort toward the creation of a society in which the maximum role of government is the protection of life, liberty, and property. As of this past Sunday, July 22nd, the website said that it had 1,044 New Hampshire participants. Frank's website lists his major interests as property rights, individual liberty, unalienable rights, constitutional principles, and state sovereignty. So, with that, I will introduce to you Frank Szabo. Frank, thank you so much for coming. I'm enjoying having you here.
Thank you, Kathy. That was a great introduction and a great intro into what the Sheriff's Office does as far as the basic responsibilities.
Well, I would be remiss after some of your introduction if I did not ask you, did you move to New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project to bring 20,000 new people to New Hampshire to what they have on the website, create a new society?
Actually, the Free State Project got me interested in New Hampshire.
Okay.
Very honestly, I probably would not have moved here if it was not for the Free State Project. But as you mentioned, my intention is to start an organic farm as a CSA where people buy shares and show up once a week. And but the Free State Project basically brought New Hampshire to my attention.
Is that right? Well, I know I saw there, I read with interest, they have 101 reasons why people should come to New Hampshire. Yeah.
Yes.
Really playing it as the live free or die state.
And New Hampshire is one of the freest states.
Now, your resume also told us that you were county coordinator in Pennsylvania for the Sheriff's Project. What is that? What is the Sheriff's Project?
The Sheriff's Project is a movement actually throughout the country at a county level for people to basically support their constitutional sheriff. There's a gentleman by the name of Sheriff Richard Mack who was a sheriff in Graham County, Arizona. and we don't have a lot of time to go into it, but he was involved in a court case that basically demonstrates the power of the county sheriff as recognized by the U.S. Supreme Court.
Okay.
And he basically tours the country trying to explain what this is all about and the authority of the county sheriff. And the Sheriff Project basically was a movement to have local citizens communicate with their county sheriff if they're not aware of the true nature of the office, and support them in actually following the Constitution.
Are all county sheriffs constitutional sheriffs?
The office is.
Okay.
Not all sheriffs actually understand the full extent of their authority.
Okay. In what way?
Well, most sheriffs are led to believe, and one of the major functions, if you will, of the office is to make sure the civil process works properly. As you mentioned, some of the functions that certain civil process is required to go through the office of the sheriff, such as mortgage foreclosures and things of that nature. They are to protect the courts. They're involved with the running of the county prison system, at least the county prisons. And so there's certain functions that all sheriffs are aware of.
Okay.
But my understanding is much more broad and much more protective of the citizens and their property and their rights. And unfortunately, that's what most sheriffs are not aware of. There's a good number of them in the country that are, and they are exercising their authority. But part of what I'm trying to do as well is making sure that sheriffs know what their authority is and understand that they're supposed to be protecting the citizens as well.
Now, do you think they know that in New Hampshire?
Some do, and actually, Sheriff Mack, as I mentioned, had a conference in Las Vegas earlier this year, and I think it's Sheriff Conley from Carroll County attended the meeting. And I believe he understands or is learning more about the true authority of the sheriff. And for example, he created a new task force just a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, to specifically look into mortgage fraud and some of these foreclosures where mortgage companies don't even have clear title, yet they're foreclosing on people's property. And that is absolutely what a sheriff is supposed to be doing, is protecting those people and their property.
Now, how would a sheriff protect the property owner from a lender like that? Again,
specifically with foreclosures, they go through the office of the sheriff. And in my opinion, a constitutional sheriff would ensure that there is clear title demonstrated before they would proceed with a foreclosure.
But would a sheriff's office have the personnel or the whatever is needed to do that?
That's their authority, and that's their duty.
But wouldn't that fall on, I'm not trying to argue with you, I'm just
not
confused.
Not at all.
Wouldn't that fall under like the banking department or something like that of a state, or?
Well, it basically goes through the court system.
Okay.
And it gets to the office of the sheriff for service, to basically serve the owners of the property. And the sheriff basically, again, should be ensuring that what is occurring is lawful, and again, that there is clear title. And if he's trying to foreclose or trying to assist in the foreclosure process on a property that does not have clear title, he's basically relinquishing his duties, and he's just allowing the system to operate without his intervention. And again, that's not what the sheriff is supposed to be there for.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm just kind of, my mind is jumping ahead to the mechanics of it, how a sheriff's office would be able to conduct those kind of searches and get that kind of information.
Well, that should be something that should be included with the foreclosure papers that are being provided to the sheriff. That should be required to be in there, that it has to document clear title.
Okay. Interesting. Let me ask you this. How important do you think that prior experience in law enforcement is to managing a county sheriff's department?
Well, it's a very good question, and most people believe that the sheriff has to either come up through law enforcement or through the military. And I think it's very interesting that the requirements for sheriff are that you're, I believe, 18 and a registered voter. That's it. And I believe that it's very specifically such a short requirement list, because when someone goes through the ranks in the military or someone goes through law enforcement through the ranks, they tend to get used to saying yes automatically to superior officers. Well, the office of the sheriff reports to the people. And as some of the documentation I talk about in my other presentations, the office of the sheriff is the highest law enforcement officer in the county and has no superior in the county. So the sheriff is not supposed to be saying yes all the time to a superior simply because of the fact that they're superior, because the sheriff doesn't have a superior in the county.
Okay.
And unfortunately, when someone goes through the ranks, as I said, they're used to saying yes all the time. And if a public official asks me to do something, I'm going to ask why. And otherwise, again, it tends to be automatic. And the sheriff needs to be able to question as to whether they're being asked to do something that's lawful or not.
Now, if somebody has not worked, though, in any avenue of law enforcement at all, how can they, like, come on to the job and day one really understand the operations of the department?
Sure.
Who needs to be doing what, all that kind of thing?
Right. Well, the office is more or less run as a business, if you will. And I have a business degree. As you said, I ran my own business, and I know how to run an office and deal with budgets and that kind of thing. And the sheriff is basically an administrator of the office, and the deputies pretty much do most of the actual work. And as you said, they are certified law enforcement officers, so that they do know the ins and outs. And I've dealt a lot, unfortunately, in the law, and had to defend myself many times through business and personally with zoning and the income tax laws. And so that, you know, I understand what laws are all about and semantics in laws and that type of thing. But the office actually is more important that you have a business sense and can understand budgets and how to balance your budget and make sure that what you spend is less than what you're getting coming in.
Now, as I mentioned during the lead-in, the offices can be in some dangerous situations,
Yes.
obviously. Do you think that somebody who is a civilian, so to speak, totally understands the impact of that on the workforce or not?
What do you mean? The danger that the officers are in?
Yeah, you know, can really address some of those concerns or preventative measures or whatever may be needed. Do you think somebody who's a civilian has a grasp of that? Or?
Well, I think that the average person may not. I think that, again, a sheriff, no matter what their background, needs to rely on the deputies that are there and have been there for years as to the ins and outs of the operation of the sheriff's office and the duties of the deputies themselves. I think the position of sheriff, the office of sheriff itself, has a much more broad responsibility that understanding the mechanics, if you will, of law enforcement is not as important as understanding what the office is and how important it is to the protection of the people and their rights.
Now, do you yourself know of sheriffs who did go into it with cold of law enforcement experience or not?
Not specifically offhand. I would imagine that there are. I mean, people, the founding of this country was based mostly on farming. And sheriffs went from farming to being sheriff. And again, obviously it's very different nowadays, but again, the requirement is not there. You don't have to be in law enforcement to be a good sheriff. And again, it may be helpful, but I would rely very strongly on the deputies that are there as to the mechanics, again, of the law enforcement and the system.
I hadn't heard that before. It's interesting. Interesting take on it all. Yeah. Now, what do you think is the most important function of the Sheriff's Department in general or in Hillsborough County specifically?
Well, all sheriffs throughout the United States are charged with protecting the rights and the property of the citizens. And there's a document that I talk about called Anderson on Sheriffs. There was a treatise that was written back in the 40s by a prominent attorney of the day that actually practiced before the Supreme Court. And he saw what was going on in the country and wanted to make sure that things got written down. And so he created this document, and it's titled A Treatise on the Law of Sheriffs, Constables, and Coroners. And in it, it spells out in no uncertain terms that the county sheriff is the CEO of the county. As I said, they have no superior in the county. They report to the people, they're elected by the people. And the sheriff is responsible for protecting the rights, the property, and the morals of the citizens. And the sheriff has to ensure that everything that occurs in the county is lawful. And there's a big difference between legal and lawful. It used to be legal to own slaves, but it was never lawful. And the sheriff is to ensure that everything is lawful that occurs in the county. And if something is occurring that is not lawful, if someone's rights are being violated, that sheriff is duty-bound to protect those rights.
So now, wouldn't that put social change in some cases under the responsibility of a sheriff?
Social change specifically, no. Again, if someone's rights or property are being attacked or violated, the sheriff can get involved. Social change is kind of outside that purview. However, again, if someone feels that their rights are being violated, the sheriff can intervene if necessary.
Now, is that a nationwide thing, that the sheriffs do not have to answer to county commissioners at all?
Well, I wouldn't say that they don't have to answer them. They certainly have to work with the county commissioners, and for budgetary reasons. Again, the county sheriff is an administrator and has to deal with lots of different people. But the authority of the county sheriff, let me back up for a second if I could. The position of county sheriff is actually an ancient one. It dates back to at least the year 900 in England. The county sheriff was always there to protect the rights and the property of the sovereign. Well, when the colonists came over to the North America, the office of the county sheriff came with them, still for the king. After the Revolution, along with a number of things got turned upside down, and now the citizens became the sovereigns.
Okay.
The county sheriff remained now to protect the rights and the property of the sovereign citizens. That is very important because the county sheriff, the office of the sheriff, predates the Constitution. It's based in common law, which is more or less common sense. So because of that, the office of the sheriff, no matter what state they're in, has these same responsibilities. And the bottom line is they are there to protect the rights and the property of the citizens. Doesn't matter what state.
Trigger.
So.
Yeah. Now, budgets are tight everywhere, obviously, both in government and in private business. Do you think this has affected the operations of the sheriff's office here in Hillsborough County, or have you had a chance to look at that at all?
I haven't gotten into the details of that. Basically, budgets are budgets, and as you said, it's tight pretty much everywhere. And it does mean that the sheriff, as well as every public official, needs to make sure that every dollar that they spend is spent well. But again, the office of the sheriff, part of their responsibility is to make sure that the money that's spent is spent lawfully.
Okay. Okay. Now, if money were not an issue, do you see improvements that you would want to put into effect? Improvements
in the office of the sheriff?
Yes, in Hillsborough County.
I don't believe that there would be any improvements necessary. Again, as far as I know, the office is running perfectly well, it's functioning well. My opinion is that the office is not functioning sufficiently in that they're not protecting the rights and the property of the citizens. They're mainly dealing with the courts alone.
Now, as far as everything else goes, do you think they're doing a good job?
Yes, as far as I know, I really haven't heard anything negative, and as far as I know, Jim Hardy's a great guy and he's doing a wonderful job. Again, with the avenue that it's his understanding as far as what the sheriff does.
And now, are there any new programs that you would want to implement as a new sheriff?
No new programs. To answer your question directly, but again, the office of the sheriff is supposed to be there to protect the rights and the property of the citizens. And that's not a program, if you will, or the only thing I could think of is, as I said, Sheriff Connolly up in Carroll County with his task force investigating mortgage frauds, and the fact that a lot of foreclosures don't have clear title for people. So that people are having their homes taken away, even if the mortgage is paid up and they're still being foreclosed on. So I wouldn't necessarily consider that a program, but that would certainly be something that would be new that I would wholly support and want to mirror here as well in Hillsborough.
Now, given the same budgets, because we'll have to assume the budgets won't dramatically change over over the next couple of years, and given the same staffing level, because again, because of budgets, we have to assume it will stay basically the same. Do you think people in New Hampshire would want to see a shift I mean, because obviously what you're saying, no matter how you cut it, if the sheriff's office has to start examining mortgage documents and foreclosure documents and all those kind of things that you're talking about,
Sure.
Which sounds good, but if they have to start spending staff time and so on that, then something has to give. So do you think that that's more important than things they do now, like being involved in searching for missing persons or missing children, or being involved in so many different ways in like domestic issues, or
Right.
serving warrants, which obviously is a huge part of their job. And I think everybody can agree, generally it's not the low level who has warrants out on them. It's usually
Right.
somebody who's done some kind of dastardly
Serious.
deeds.
Sure.
And those kind of things that really are vital and protecting us, for that matter, even in things as simple as when prison is being transported and such. Now, something would have to give for the energies of the office and its personnel to get involved in that whole new avenue for them,
Well,
like mortgages and such.
Right.
So, I mean, how do you think people would take that?
Okay.
How do you think you could accomplish that?
Specifically using that as an example as far as
Yeah.
the mortgage foreclosures,
Yeah.
the sheriff could simply require that along with this document from the court saying to foreclose on this particular property, the sheriff could require that clear title is documented in these papers. It wouldn't require any additional expenditure of time or effort on the deputies or the office of the sheriff, but it would require that before a foreclosure is processed, that clear title is demonstrated in the paperwork.
But how could he force it? Because from what I understand,
that's the authority of the sheriff.
Well,
that's the whole point.
But from what I'm understanding, there's all kinds of agencies now involved in the pursuit of that kind of information, all kinds of entities, and they keep getting stonewalled and not getting the answers. So how can now the sheriff all of a sudden say, well, good for them, but you will answer to me? I mean, what authority does the sheriff have? Can the sheriff go, if you're involved in a foreclosure, you're the president of the bank and you're foreclosing my house, but yet you're not providing the clear title to it and so on, and as sheriff you say, you will do it, and he looks at you and says, keep on waiting. Do you have the authority to arrest him? Do you have the authority to drag him into court because he broke some kind of a law? I mean, how does, I'm trying to wrap my head around
Sure.
what you're saying.
Sure.
How does the sheriff now all of a sudden turn it into the sheriff's office bailiwick to force things that, like, a lot of agencies and state bureaus and so on haven't been successful in forcing?
Okay, let me give you an example. Back in Pennsylvania, this was a few years ago.
Yeah.
It was brought to the sheriff's attention in one particular county that there were problems with mortgages and foreclosures specifically. He basically had a 30-day moratorium on any new foreclosures until they caught up with what was going on and made sure that what they had was accurate and legal.
Now, moratorium on what?
On any new foreclosures.
Well, what from what?
Being filed to be served. Again,
I mean, he can't stop the bank from doing their paperwork.
No.
So what was he doing? Refusing to accept them and act on them?
The foreclosure has to go through the office of the sheriff, specifically with that.
So was he just refusing to accept them and act on them?
He would not accept any for 30 days.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And absolutely has that authority to do that. Again, the sheriff, because the office of the sheriff is based in common law,
okay,
they have to make sure that whatever happens in the county is lawful. That's what the documentation says. That's what the sheriff is all about. So if they are processing a foreclosure and are not ensuring that the foreclosure is lawful, that there is clear title on the property, then the sheriff is relinquishing their duty and not protecting the citizens and their property.
Well, can a bank or a mortgage company find a way to do an end run around the sheriff's office?
It's got to go through the office of the sheriff. And even if they tried, that then could be considered unlawful and the sheriff could get involved, specifically going after that bank. And one of the problems specifically with the mortgage companies is they went through a recording service. Instead of individually recording deeds at the county level and paying the fee each time to the county, they went through a recording service which sort of did it in bulk. and lost clear title. So a lot of these mortgage companies, especially the largest ones, don't have clear title.
I understand that. Yeah, there's I think got television specials on it. In fact, yeah.
And again, when a foreclosure tries to be processed or is attempting to be processed, it goes through the office of the sheriff to be served. It's required to do that.
Well, I guess that's where I'm kind of confused, because it goes to the office of the sheriff to be served.
Yes.
But, I mean, what state statute or anything else would allow the sheriff to do more than just serve it?
To say, I'm not going to serve it?
Yeah.
First of all, he swears an oath of office to uphold and defend the Constitution. If someone's property is being taken away unlawfully, that's violating their rights, which are guaranteed in the Constitution. By oath of office, that sheriff has to ensure that what happens does not violate someone's rights. That gives them the authority, along with many other court cases, again, that are referenced in Anderson on sheriffs, that go into some of the details and documentation as to where this authority comes from. But again, because the office is based in common law, predating the Constitution, the authority is based on common sense. And if someone claims that you have their property, they have to prove it. And if they can't prove it, you get to keep that property. That's what the sheriff is supposed to be doing, ensuring that what happens is lawful and that property rights are protected.
I have to tell you, you've been one of the more intriguing candidates that I've interviewed.
Well, thank you.
Definitely, and that's something I'd love to talk with you more about in the future.
Sure, and
however,
that's just mortgages.
I'm looking at the clock, and we are quickly running out of time. So what I would like you to do is, that camera over there will train right on you, and I want you to tell people why they need to give you the vote.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Again, my whole point is the county sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer of the county. They are charged and duty-bound with protecting your rights, your property. Any constitutional rights are to be protected, the rights guaranteed by the Constitution. The county sheriff is supposed to be your protector, and it doesn't matter whether it's a federal agency, a state agency, or your next-door neighbor. If they are violating your rights or attempting to take your property, the sheriff is supposed to be helping to protect you. My website is szaboforsheriff.com. It's on the screen. I'd invite you to check out the website. Feel free to send me an email, contact me with questions. And one of the first things I will do as sheriff is send notice to every single federal agency. They will not come into the county unless they go through the office of the county sheriff. The county sheriff has that authority, and if it is not lawful in the opinion of the sheriff, it will not happen. Thank you for your attention.
Good job. Well, I do have to thank you for being here. That was quite an interesting interview. And best of luck with your campaign.
Thank you very much, Kathy.
Okay, and I guess we can all agree that Frank certainly, as I said before, I think he's one of the most intriguing people that I've interviewed since I started the show a year ago. And he certainly does tell it like it is, which is what this show's all about, and which is what we want you to do too. So until next time, keep on telling it like it is. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.